Chapter 1. The Sign of the Curse. It is said that the first omen does not arrive with thunder, nor with the heraldry of kings, but with a small and unassuming ring of ash that blooms upon the flesh like a patient eclipse. Men called it the dark sign, though the name offered no comfort, for to name a thing is not to master it. It appears without summons and without mercy, a brand that does not burn, and a wound that does not heal. Within its circle, the meaning of endings quietly unravels. Where it settles, the line between life and death grows thin, and the one who bears it steps into a long twilight where days continue, but the heart no longer follows. In another age, when the memory of true endings still moved, like a clear wind through the fields of men, death was an appointment kept with dignity. Old friends gathered, last words were spoken, and the earth was patient in its welcome. But when the dark sign spread, that rite dissolved. Those who perished woke once more, stripped of the gravity that anchors a life. The villagers who once whispered prayers began to whisper other things. The undead were gathered, not to be comforted, but to be removed. Carts creaked by moonlight toward Asylum gates, and the iron locks turned with a finality that the curse itself never granted. Within those walls, built high to keep despair from touching the ordinary day, silence learned to speak in other tongues. It spoke in the shuffle of bare feet, in the clink of chains meant as kindness, in the dull scrape of a bowl along the floor. The keepers kept their distance. Some remembered the undead as neighbors who had once tended fields and children. Others remembered them as omens, as answers to questions best left unasked. Yet even the most fearful could not deny a simple truth. The curse did not die, and the world had forgotten how to live with those who would not leave it. It is whispered that hollowing begins, not with the loss of flesh, but with the loosening of meaning. The undead rise, once, twice, and again, and each return carries away a little more of the thread that binds a name to a face, a memory to a purpose. The song a mother once sang is remembered for a while, then only its rhythm, then the quiet after, until even the quiet becomes indistinguishable from the wind. Some resist, drawing maps on the stone with pottery shards, repeating yesterday's words as incantations, tracing the shape of their names in dust until the letters grow strange. Others sit very still and contemplate the space where desire once lived. The dark sign does not command, it does not speak, it simply is, a patient law inscribed upon the soul. It draws the bearer into a cycle without judgment or haste, and yet, in that ceaseless return, there is a cruel arithmetic at work. Each death, each awakening, each step inside the ring of ash asks the same question: what remains of a person when the end is refused them? Some answer with anger, and the stones of the asylum bear their marks. Some answer with prayer, and the prayers grow thin, for even faith has always leaned upon the promise of rest. Some answer with silence, not surrender, but the weary dignity of those who have counted the cost, and found that even grief may tire. In time there came the words of a prophecy, as there always are when the world grows uncertain, and the mind seeks a frame for the unframed. It spoke of one undead who would be chosen, not for virtue or strength, but because the world requires shapes into which hope can be poured. The prophecy drifted like mist through the cells and courtyards, a rumor that could not be locked away. It found its way into the quiet spaces between despair and endurance. Some clung to it as a ladder beyond the wall. Others called it a story told by those who feared the truth, that the curse was not a puzzle to be solved, but a mirror in which all saw themselves without the ornaments of a brief age of fire. In the north, Where storms gather upon stone like old vows, the asylum stood as both refuge and oubliette, a prison of forgetting. Its gates were taller than memory, and ravens nested upon the arches, as if they too were wardens. From a high window, the sky could be seen, a narrow river of pale light between walls. It is said that the undead would look up through that severed piece of heaven and try to recall the taste of open air. Some remembered, others remembered only that there was something to remember, and found in that absence a grief too subtle to name. Among the afflicted were those who taught small lessons in the art of remaining. One showed another how to wrap a strip of cloth so that old wounds would not open with each return. Another shared the knowledge that water in a bowl loses its chill more slowly when kept near the floor. These kindnesses were not heroic, yet they shone with a stubborn light, as if to declare that the curse could not burn away all that made life gentle. Even in the shadow of unending days, there were gestures that resisted forgetting. Even where the future was only repetition, there was dignity in how that repetition was born. Of the dark sign itself, scholars wrote little that endured. Parchments browned, inks faded, and the scribes who once sought to measure the unmeasurable abandoned their ledgers when their own flesh began to bear the ring. It is known that the sign binds the soul to a hearth far older than the asylum's braziers, that it entwines the bearer with a law beneath the laws of men, and that it predates all kingdoms that tried to deny it. Beyond this are only the testimonies of those who woke again and again in the same dusk. Some spoke of dreams of a distant fire that did not warm, some of the sound of wings like sails, some of nothing at all, and their eyes when they opened were very old. The keepers who feared the undead, and feared even more what the undead revealed, made their rounds with torches whose light seemed thinner each season. They counted bodies by habit, though the count was never final, and marked the walls with days that did not matter. When an undead failed to rise after a fall upon the stones, they waited. When the waiting grew long, they waited longer. Among them lingered a superstition that if one spoke aloud the life a man had lived before the sign, it might compel him to return. And so, in the loneliest watches, a keeper might whisper a name, a trade, a village, calling a child in from the dark. Sometimes the undead stirred, sometimes he did not. The torch guttered either way. Some remember a knight with a ruined shield who looked up into a cracked vault of stone, as if searching for a consolation not of this place. He had come from far away, carrying a task he confessed to no one. He moved among the cells with careful purpose. His gaze lingered on each soul, as if measuring their quiet endurance. It is said he looked upon the cursed not with disgust, but with a sorrow that did not pity, like a man regarding his reflection in a window when the lamp has burned low. Of his name there are differing accounts, but his quiet was certain, and the purpose that steadied his hands seemed older than fear. So the days turned without turning. The undead learned to measure time, not in seasons, but in the fading of particulars. A crow's cry, once sharp, became merely a sign that the world still had edges. The taste of stale bread became an idea rather than a sensation. The pain of a wound, once proof of being, settled into memory without date. Yet in the marrow of even the most weary persisted something that did not permit complete surrender. It was not pride, and not hope alone. It was a slender thread that hummed softly when the wind moved through the high window. A remembrance that meaning is not always received, but sometimes made, stitch by patient stitch. Thus does the dark sign mark the beginning of a road whose end is not an end. It gathers the afflicted into a circle and asks them to walk until the circle seems a straight line, until the walls appear as horizons, until the silence learns to sing. The brand upon the flesh becomes a question written upon the soul, and the answer is not given in a single word or act, but in how one chooses to carry what cannot be put down. And so the silence deepened, and within it a distant wingbeat sounded like the promise of a door. For even in a world where endings have forgotten themselves, there remains the possibility of a first step, and the first step is always the same: to stand. Chapter 2. The Asylum and the Dream of Escape. It is said that there comes a morning in the asylum when the light through the high window seems a shade less distant, when the dust rises and falls as if listening, and a soul that has long rehearsed the motions of despair discovers the smallest deviation in its step. It is not a revelation or a miracle. It is the recognition that the door has hinges. Days in the undead asylum do not end so much as repeat. Bowls are pushed along stone. Shackles are adjusted with the gentleness of resignation. Wardens pace, counting those who cannot be counted. Between these motions lies a quiet that presses the spirit outward, as if the very air were a wall. Here the undead learn the ritual of continuation, to rise again, to gather what little remains of themselves, to carry it a short distance, and to lay it down once more. Purpose thins, names blur, yet even in this grey rehearsal, a faint current persists beneath the floor. Many remember the sound before they remember its source, an echoing impact that trembles the vault of the cell and shakes dust from the mortar. Above, stone gives way. A body drops through the broken ceiling and lies still. Upon that lifeless form rests a humble mercy, an iron key tied to leather, meant for a simple lock. Later there will be time for questions and for grief. Now there is only the hinge and the hand that turns it. The door yields. Cold air moves along the corridor. With it comes a truth so plain it cuts. The world beyond the cell continues. The undead steps into a passage lined with the same stone that has always enclosed him, yet crossing it alters the stone. The floor slopes. The light changes shape. In the distance, the old chorus of chains and breath is joined by other sounds, the scrape of armor, the slow rhythm of something vast at rest, the whisper of wings that are not here and yet already felt. There are first lessons in freedom, and they come quickly. A weapon must be found, not cherished but held. A shield must be lifted, not trusted but used. The body must remember that it has weight and that it answers to the will. Within the courtyard, the air is colder. The asylum rises around it in circles of wall and gate, a refuge that was always a prison. Beyond a door that sighs as it opens, a shadow steps forward and fills the room with mass. The ancient keeper of this place, dull-eyed and vast, whose bulk makes the floor complain. The first blow teaches caution, the second insists upon retreat. The path continues not through strength, but through survival, and the undead, still learning the grammar of movement, flees through the narrow way. Elsewhere in the ruin, a knight lies beneath a broken arch, his armor once bright, and now scarred by years. His name is Oscar of Astora. His breath is thin. He has climbed these walls, not to escape his fate, but to place it into other hands. He speaks quietly, not as one who instructs, but as one who has carried a vision as far as he can. He tells of a pilgrimage, and of bells that must be rung, of awakening, and of a land that waits beyond the fog. He offers an Estus flask, a simple vessel in which a little warmth has been persuaded to linger, and a key to doors not made for mercy. He asks forgiveness for the burden he gives. He asks, as the dying often do, for the work to be continued. When pain releases him, he rests. If the undead returns later, Oscar's eyes will no longer know him, and duty will have hardened into reflex. Here another law is learned. Mercy sometimes wears steel. The rhythm of the asylum reveals itself once the first terror passes. Paths that seemed closed turn and double back. Gates that appeared final give way to side doors and narrow stairs. A weapons room holds only rust and promise. Even rust, properly guided, can part old rope and rotten wood. The undead moves through these lessons like a swimmer learning the shape of water. First, slow strokes, then a steadier confidence that surprises by its persistence. The Great Keeper is met again, not as an accident, but as an appointment. The room in which he waits is wide enough for an echo to return twice before it fades. He descends with a weight that belongs more to stone than to flesh. The undead steps aside at the last, and the floor remembers the impact. The creature's hide is thick and patient. Its hammering strength admits no argument. So the pilgrim circles, he watches, he waits, he strikes at the softened joints rather than the slab. Persistence becomes its own blade. At last, the keeper falls. The asylum exhales. For a moment the silence is pure. Beyond the great gate, a courtyard opens, wet with old weather and the smell of iron. The walls end in an abrupt lip of stone, over a cliff hidden by distance and cloud. There are no roads. A hard wind rises, filling the lungs and holding them. A wordless warning. The undead steps toward the edge, because there is nowhere else to go, and because prophecy asks assent before it grants understanding. The first messenger of the journey does not speak. Out of the high air, a shadow unfolds into wings older than the walls, and as patient as winter, the raven descends with the unhurried certainty of an old ritual. Its talons close, not cruelly, but completely, and the world falls away into a sweep of sky. The asylum turns beneath like a coin, then narrows to a memory. Wind becomes a road, cloud becomes a veil. The body learns a new stillness, the stillness of being carried. From above, the land reveals itself by degrees. Grey battlements give way to a country of broken towers and sunken courts. Bridges no longer reach what they were meant to reach. Aqueducts stride across emptiness and arrive, at last, at the other side of nothing. Far below, on the cliff's edge, where an ancient tree clings to the rock with a saint's patience, a ring of ruined walls encircles a fire that neither prospers nor dies. The raven lowers its burden onto worn flagstones. Around the flame, figures sit like discarded statues, silent, watching, waiting for the world to choose. This place is called Firelink Shrine. It is not a sanctuary, as men once understood sanctuary, for the wind has free passage here, and the dead are not kept out. It is, rather, a threshold. The fire at its heart is a memory of warmth, more than warmth itself. Yet even that memory gathers the afflicted into its dim circle. A man in ragged robes murmurs about destinies and bells. A crestfallen warrior studies the ground, as if the ground might answer him. The air tastes of rust and of rain that has not yet fallen. Here, at the end of the first road, and the beginning of countless roads, the undead learns to sit, to breathe, and to rise again with intention. Behind the shrine, an aqueduct reaches toward a distant parish. Before it, stairways descend into a cemetery where the dead refuse their rest. Paths curl outward like roots seeking water. Every direction promises difficulty and instruction. None promise rest. Yet the world is open, The circle of the cell has widened into a horizon, and the horizon bears a question that invites rather than threatens what will be done with the days that refuse to end. It is said that on the first night at Firelink, the wind sounds like wings even when the sky is empty. It moves through the broken arches and across the ash at the fire's edge, and it carries the scent of places not yet seen. The estus warms the hand, the hilt remembers the last grip. The prophecy, once a rumor composed by strangers, settles in the chest like a slow and solemn drum. It does not promise triumph, it promises only a road. Night gathers above the shrine, the fire holds, the way is hard and without promise of ease. The undead does not yet know the end. He knows only this: he will go. Chapter 3. Firelink Shrine. Firelink Shrine is a ring of worn stone around a cautious flame. Wind crosses the arches without asking. The sky looks in. Warmth returns in a measure that is never enough, yet it is enough to stand. This is not a refuge. It is a hinge between roads. On three sides the ground falls away. A cliff that keeps its counsel, a stair that sinks toward hidden water, an aqueduct that threads back to fallen streets. The shrine's geometry is a map made plain. Each opening begins with toil and ends in uncertainty. The first privilege here is simple to choose. There are companions, though few would claim the name. A warrior in dented mail sits with his back to a broken wall and speaks without rising. 2 bells, he says, one above the parish, one far below. He neither urges nor forbids. He lays out a task like a map and leaves the journey to the feet that will follow it. Behind iron bars set into the shrine's own foundations, a woman keeps her silence. She does not speak because she cannot, yet the flame listens to her in a way it does not listen to others. She is the firekeeper. Her presence states a law without words. Fires endure because someone chooses to tend them. In time, with a soul meant for that work, she can strengthen the flask, for now she offers witness and the calm that belongs to a vow. At the courtyard's edge, a cleric of Thurland cleans the mud from his boots with patient care. Courtesy shields his purpose. He sells miracles as one might lend old tools, carefully, with instruction, and only to the willing. Others of his order will come. Their road points toward catacombs, where bone rises at a summons. The shrine has its rites. Sit, and the fire answers. Hold a thought, and the body remembers. Lift the estus, and the world resumes its weight. Resting restores, but it does not absolve. Death returns as lesson rather than conclusion, and the flame keeps its ledger without comment. Paths extend outward. The aqueduct leads to Undead Berg, a climb of collapsed streets and ladders that cling like brittle vines. Above it, the parish waits with rafters, ropes, and a bell that has slept long. An iron boar patrols a gate, and a blacksmith beats patience into bent metal beneath a tower. Another way descends by elevator into New Londo, a city drowned by design. Water preserves and condemns its arches. The men who warded it poured sorrow until the walls held pale ghosts. Keep the channels there. Iron does little and flame less. One may walk those halls and feel hands pass through mail like current through reeds. The third path is the oldest and least forgiving. Graves spill down the slope like a broken stair, and the dead, faithful to their title, stand again when asked. Beyond yawns a catacomb, carved by centuries. Light falters. Statues multiply until the living are obliged to count them. Some turn back and carry that lesson up with them like a scar. The shrine hears the traffic of decisions. Boots ring on stone, light when steps are sure, heavy when they are not. Traders on their own errands pass through, and sometimes remain. A distant anvil will one day thread the wind. A stranger in bright silk will set out wares beneath the aqueduct. Others will come if rescued. Some will stay who should not. For now the circle is spare, and the fire's voice is loudest. High above, a nest lies cradled in the rock. It is larger than memory, and very patient. Those who curl there, small and still, sometimes find themselves returned to older rooms, as if the world had decided to repeat a page. Fair trades can be made with hands that are not seen, provided the asking is precise. Rumor moves with the wind. It speaks of serpents that sleep in the foundations of kingdoms, and wake when ancient gates stir. Should the bells answer, a mouth like a well may rise from dark water and offer counsel. The shrine keeps such sayings as a ledger keeps old entries, recorded, not yet due. At the fire, decisions are made in quiet. To go up is to meet men who have forgotten themselves. To go down is to be a guest among the unburied. To go deeper is to walk where walls remember flood and regret. The flame replies the same to all. It breathes and holds. The undead learns to lower ladders for his future self, to turn elevators into promises, to find circles in a country of dead ends. Shortcuts become gifts. He leaves for the one who will be him later. In time he learns to see the shrine from above and return to it with the ease that once belonged only to crows. Each path walk draws a new line on the internal map. The fire greets that line without praise or complaint. Names gather here, a courteous knight whose smile conceals a test, a wanderer who teaches flame to answer the hand, a scholar behind iron bars who hears sorcery like distant music, a merchant whose laughter hides arithmetic. Their paths brush the shrine as comets brush the night. At dusk, the shrine looks older than it did at noon. Shadows pool in the hollows of the stone. The crestfallen warrior lifts his head when the last color leaves the day and listens for a bell no wind can carry. The firekeeper passes her hand above the coals and does not flinch. The cleric folds his cloak and watches the stair that leads toward the catacombs. Night arrives without ceremony. Sparks drift upward and vanish before the stars. Far off, armor scrapes. A chain slaps stone. A door closes on the wind. Sleep comes a little, or not at all. It matters less than it once did. What matters is the rising, and the rising has become a craft. Morning returns. The flask warms the palm. Steel settles into the hand like remembered grammar. Paths wait where they waited before, indifferent and exact. He looks toward the aqueduct, toward the lift, toward the graves. Silence answers, but it is not empty. He chooses and goes. Behind him, the shrine keeps its ember for his return. Chapter 4. The Lords and Their Ashes. When both bells have spoken, one above the parish, one beneath the earth, the old world remembers a promise. Chains withdraw from hidden gears. A fortress wakes. Giants pull levers sworn never to sleep. Beyond its tests, sunlight gathers on a distant city that gleams like a verdict. There, a figure robed in radiance offers charge and vessel. She names herself Guinevere, daughter of the Lord of Sunlight. Some say this vision is woven by another hand. The task remains. Bear the Lord vessel, open the sealed ways, and gather the great souls to answer the first flame. At Firelink, 2 serpents set the terms plainly. Frantic Seeker urges obedience to the old order, link the fire, and prolong the age of light. Kathi, the dark stalker, counsels refusal, let the fire fade, and begin the age of dark, the age of man. Their mouths open to the same sea, but their currents run opposite. The choice can wait, for now the Lord vessel breathes, golden fog dissolves, and 4 roads unseal. First, down through the catacombs into the tomb of the giants, where the first of the dead keeps court. Gravlord Nito is not a single body, but the agreement of many bones to move together. His portion of the first flame was death, and in the war against dragons he spread miasma where immortality once stood. The descent is near sightless. Skeletons rise at the sound of bone on stone. Wheel-bound dead trace their old harvests in mad circles. Lantern priests drift, their light blinds more than it guides. At the tomb's lowest floor, Nito stirs, and the dead stir with him. Blades find joints. Patience outlasts the press. When the Gravlord collapses, wind passes strangely through the earth, and a heavy soul, soil dark and solemn, falls into the Lord vessel. Elsewhere, heat, the demon ruins, and lost Izalith burn under a sky that tries and fails to become fire. In the age of strength, the Witch of Izalith sought to weave another first flame. The attempt broke and became the Chaos Flame, a hunger that breeds shapes that do not hold. From it came demons, from it a bed where corruption roots and calls itself life. The road runs by molten caverns and through chambers where bodies remember forms that were never theirs. A guardian weeps fire that will not cool. Far within, roots overrule architecture, and a hateful tree guards a small living core. The bed of chaos breaks itself to make killing harder. Floors give way. The body falls and returns until the center is found. Strike the hidden heart, and the cathedral of branches remembers gravity. The soul of the bed of chaos rushes to the vessel, bright, fevered, and wrong. Further on, height. The Duke's archives spiral upward into a library that became a prison. Seeth, the scaleless, pale betrayer of his kind, traded stone for privilege and pursued safety in knowledge. His deathlessness had a source, the primordial crystal. Scholars, now hollow, turn pages whose arguments do not end. Golems patrol, like footnotes, turned hostile. Seeth receives intruders certain of his immunity. Certainty can be broken. Crystal shatters. The scream is glass. In the caves beyond the stacks, among blue pillars and false paths, the dragon meets the end he denied. What he yields is not a full soul, but a bequeathed shard. It is burden enough. The Lord vessel takes the bequeathed Lord soul shard, and the archives fall quiet. Blast. Absence. New Londo is a city drowned by design. Its sealers chose water over ruin, and water kept both. To stand in the abyss, one must wear a ring taken from a faithful wolf who guards a dead knight's promise. With the floods loosed and the seal undone, the ground gives up, and the undead drops into a night without floor. The 4 kings wait there, once rulers blessed by sunlight, later bargainers in the dark. Time misbehaves. They come one, and then many. Blades carve space. Sorceries burn like quiet stars. Delay breeds more foes. Meet each as it arrives. Entirely, when the last unbinds, the pressure of the abyss eases, and another bequeathed shard settles beside the others. Thus the burdens gather, the soul of Gravlord Nito, the soul of the bed of chaos, the bequeathed shard from Seeth the Scaleless, the bequeathed shard from the 4 kings. The path, bends back to the source. Frampt praises, Kathy instructs, both claim arithmetic on their side. None can carry the choice for the one who bears the bowl. What remains of the lords is cinder and instruction. Gawain left his throne to feed the first flame with himself until both were almost gone. Neto's rule of endings softened into sleep. Izalith's mastery fractured into grief and heat without shape. Seath's quest for immortality built a library of cages. The four kings traded stewardship for hunger and let a city drown to serve it. The undead does not inherit their crowns. He inherits their questions. The Lord vessel is offered, and a great lidless door remembers how to open. Beyond it is not noon, and not dawn, but the color of ash when it is bright. The place it reveals is not another dungeon. It is an ending given a shape. The kiln of the first flame waits white with ash, littered with black husks that burned in faithful order. A figure walks there whose name does not need speaking. The flame at the world's heart gutters. The journey narrows to a single answer. No serpent will voice it. No prophecy will force it. The hand that bears the last of the Lord's fire will decide whether the age continues or is allowed to rest. Chapter 5. The Hollowing of the Self. Hollowing is not an event. It is the slow subtraction of particulars from a life until only a shape remains that remembers it once had weight. A man may die 100 times and still not be hollow. Another may stand uninjured and feel his purpose slip like sand between the fingers. The undead learns this difference in small proofs the world keeps offering. A step grows lighter, not from grace, but from forgetting. A name feels misfitted in the mouth that speaks it. The fire warms the hands and leaves the heart unchanged. There is a law that binds the flesh to loss. Humanity, small as a coal in the palm, glows when tended and gutters when ignored. It can be offered to the fire, and the fire answers with greater kindness. It can be spent to shed the withered skin of ash and stand again with one's face restored. Upon each fall, the world demands a tax, a stain where the body failed, and with it the warmth that had been carried. One may return and gather what was lost. One may turn away and let the stain fade into stone. Courage is not always pressing forward. Sometimes it is turning back to meet oneself. Between roads, the shrine keeps its ember. The crestfallen warrior speaks less and says more. Mornings place edges on his words. Evenings draw them off. In time, his voice grows quiet, and a figure in the same armor stands where the graves begin. Duty worn down into attack and retaliation. Some swear it is the same man. Others say the world repeats a rhyme when a lesson refuses to be learned. Either way, the cost is plain. Another face returns like sunlight through cloud. Solaire of Astora crosses paths again and again, cheerful as a vow, seeking a son he can call his own. In one path, he lifts his eyes at Anor Londo and finds what he was promised, joy tempered by what must follow. In another, a light answers from the ground, and devotion becomes a lure. If a friend walks beside him with clear eyes, his hunger can be named and laid to rest. If not, the hunger names him. Fellowship can be shield or mirror. Here both are needed. Elsewhere, a scholar removes familiar garments and speaks to absence as if to an old friend. Big Hat Logan followed a dragon into the deep logic of crystal and found a promise of safety without end. He returns to the stacks with only his mind for company. The sentences he mutters do not finish. Knowledge is a kingdom without walls. Those who rule it alone are easily unseated. In the catacombs and their cellars, Rhea of Thorland kneels at prayer that trembles at the edges. Her guardians weigh vows against fear. A smiling guide, Lautrec, sells trust with steady hands, and tries to purchase a life with a push. The undead may arrive in time to unbind what was meant to be bound. He may not. Rhea has many endings in men's mouths, and all are true to a world that offers help only to those who accept it. Under ancient boughs, a knight dozes in the hollow of his armor, and greets trouble with a laugh that makes trouble pause. Siegmeyer of Katarina stands in doorways that do not wish to open, and asks them to open anyway. Each time he is found, a new delay holds him, a parable of courage that does not quite reach prudence. In some tellings his daughter, Sieglind, follows with rain-shaped words, and finds where kindness leads, when the world asks too much. To save a man from his nature is a grace not always granted. The undead witnesses, and moves on. Sometimes that too is mercy. Cruelty walks the bright steps of Anor Londo below Firelink. A prisoner tends the flame with hands that know vows. Then the railing stands empty. The coals answer no one. A ring warms in the pocket. A black eye turns toward a cathedral where a man in guiltless gold, Lautrec, counts virtues he does not possess. The undead can follow that gaze, carry a stolen voice back to its home, and hear the fire speak again. He may also decide that some silences should remain. The world remembers both choices and adjusts around them with a care that looks like indifference and is wisdom. Not all signs wear names. Summoned phantoms arrive as pale help and leave with a small bow, proof that the world still allows crossing. Red invaders descend like judgments paid in another coin. Defeat teaches as much as victory. Messages scroll themselves onto stones by hands that are elsewhere. A new grammar appears. Try jumping. Beware fall. Illusory wall ahead. Sometimes the messages lie. Even that is useful. The honesty of a world can be measured by the honesty of its signs. Hollowing also shrinks horizons. In Blighttown the air presses the chest, as if the swamp had learned envy. In Sen's fortress, the traps speak a language older than pity. In the painted world, the snow does not forgive. In New Londo, the water remembers a choice that could not bear daylight. Each place was made by hands that meant something once, and found themselves hungry after the meaning was gone. Between journeys, the undead sits at Firelink and learns a craft not taught by book or blade. He lowers ladders for a stranger who is himself in another hour. He turns elevators into promises. He spends what cannot be kept to kindle what can be shared. The face in the water is not always an accusation. Sometimes it is only a report. The flask warms the palm. The hilt fits more surely than before. Scars rid like a map in raised ink. There are warnings that the self can become a fortress whose gates do not open to friends. A man who loves miracles may hide his fear of the dark behind rules that keep the dark intact. A woman who tends the fire may forget the fire is meant to be given away. A knight who seeks a sun may refuse to see it when it rises where he did not expect. Hollowing is not merely the loss of flesh, it is the refusal of correction. To be corrected is to live. A season passes, faces at the shrine are fewer. The merchant in bright silk has gone to other stones. The clink of a distant anvil fills a day. Sometimes the serpents sleep. Their mouths look like wells that have lost their rope. The wind names the same 3 paths until the names grow pale. Yet in the marrow of the pilgrim, something remains that will not permit surrender. Call it habit, call it devotion, call it stubbornness that has forgotten its reason and therefore no longer requires one. The inward rooms are not spared. Behind the ribs, Questions rehearse themselves without end. Who asked me to bear this flame? Who benefits from obedience? What is owed to the dead, and what is owed to those yet to be born? No serpent answers, no bell confirms. The reply is given slowly, by the hand that lifts the shield when it would rather not, and by the step that descends a stair that no longer promises reward. Thus, the self becomes a kiln before the kiln, a place where what cannot survive the heat reveals itself, and what must remain takes on a shape that endures. Names thin and return with new meanings. Purpose goes out and is relit, smaller and steadier. The world's symbols grow quiet, and the undead trust the few that still speak plainly. The weight of steel, the honesty of an opened gate, the unadorned mercy of a fire shared. When the shrine looks east, and the sky refuses to change its color, the undead stands. He is no less broken than when he looked up through a prison window. He is no more complete than he will be when the last door opens. He is practiced. Hollowing has taught him what remains when ornament burns away. It has taught him to keep a small ember with the care of a priest who knows that worship and work are the same motion. He cups that ember in both hands. The wind moves, the ember holds. It is enough to walk toward the place where endings are decided. Chapter 6. The Choice Beyond Fire. It is said that when the great lidless door groans aside, the air beyond it tastes of ash so fine that even breath feels like a kind of snowfall. The world narrows to pale dunes that rise and fall, as if a sea had burned to powder and continued moving out of habit. Charred trunks and broken arches lean at angles that should not stand and yet persist, held up by a patience that has outlived wood and stone. There is no sky to speak of, only a vault of light without color, a white that remembers flame. Here the steps count themselves. Black knights keep this place. Once they were silver, guardians of a bright court. Then the first flame took their color and left them the duty. Their armor wears the history of that fire, and their blades ring with a sound that does not fade when it should. They do not speak, they do not bargain. Each rises at the approach as if waking to an old order, and each falls back into stillness as if returning to it. The undead learns again the lesson already learned in 100 lesser rooms. Patience cuts deeper than haste. Timing outlives strength. One by one, the guardians yield, and the dunes remember where they fell. The path opens upon a hall without walls, a chamber etched out of light, where pillars lean inward like tall mourners. There, walking as though each step completes a prayer begun long ago, moves the Lord of Sunlight diminished to cinder. Gwyn's robes hang in black tatters. His hair is a crown of embers that forgets to smoke. His sword is a tongue of fire that will not quite speak. He does not greet. He does not command. He does as he has done since he first bent his knee to the flame. He advances to meet the one who has come after him. The encounter is not a ceremony. It is quick and without ornament. Gwynny is relentless. Every blow a habit, every rush a memory of wars fought against bodies that did not yet die as men do. He catches shields and pries them open. He drives the intruder back across dust that keeps no footprints. Yet in his fury there is a rhythm, and in rhythm there is a place to stand. Steel meets steel at the instant before the fire finds flesh. The old lord's weight is turned aside. The answering cut is honest and plain. Whether the undead fights with a hunter's timing or with the stubborn courage of one who refuses to fall again, the end is the same. At last Gwyn's blade dips, the ember crown gutters, and the Lord of Cinder descends to his knees, as if remembering how to be a man. What rises from him is not accusation, It is heat, and the tired sigh of labor finished. The soul that leaves him is large and simple. It is a door left unlatched, rather than a treasure pried loose. The undead receives it, as one receives a weight that was always meant to be carried only once. Then the world asks its last question, the only one that cannot be answered with point or edge. It waits, very still, for a hand to move. Before the undead stands the first flame, shrunken to a trembling core. Its light is the color of memory, more than of day, and its warmth is more story than heat. Behind the undead lies the pale desert of the Kiln, and beyond it the winding world that led here, roofs and rafters, catacombs and rivers, bells and gates, ladders lowered for a future self, names said and unsaid. Two councils echo in the silence. Front would call this duty, kneel, give, continue the age that knows the language of light. Kethi would name this moment deliverance, refuse, rise, let the age of men arrive without gods above it. Neither voice speaks now, the choice is not a serpent's, it is a hand's. If the undead steps forward, the decision is simple in motion and unfathomable in cost. The body lowers as if into prayer. The flame receives the offering as if surprised and very grateful. Heat climbs the limbs like a remembered season. Armor brightens, then runs, then is gone. Flesh becomes fuel, and name becomes smoke. The first flame answers with a sudden, widening breath. The old brilliance returned, not as dawn, but as reprise, a refrain briefly made whole. In halls far away, bells that have long since forgotten their own weight might tremble without sounding. In the shrine, the coals would glow as if they had been spoken to kindly. The world draws one more long season from the embers of a single life. When the bright returns to brightness, it carries no signature. The one who fed it has become part of what he preserved. Some say this is mercy, and others say it is love. All agree it is enough, if only for a while. If the undead turns away, the decision is simple in motion and unfathomable in consequence. Footsteps leave the circle of light and enter the white where the ash lies deep. The first flame continues to tremble, but no hand steadies it. From caverns under kingdoms the primordial mouths rise like wells finding their water. Serpents, long as hallways and patient as famine, bow with the fealty of old powers that have waited out a climate. They name the undead what the age requires. Lord of this ending, Lord of what comes next. The light fades by degrees that eyes can learn, and the world does not end. It changes its grammar. In places where banners once dictated the color of prayer, men look up and discover their own faces unlit by anything but their own fire. Some say this is reckoning, and others say it is freedom. All agree it is new, if only for a while. Both roads are honest. Both exact a price that cannot be paid twice. To kneel is to hold a terrible inheritance intact a little longer, so that fields ripen and walls stand and lullabies are remembered in the mouths of those who have not yet learned to mourn. To turn is to release the world from an oath it did not make, so that men may speak in their own names and bear the dark with eyes accustomed to it. The serpents will claim victory either way. They are bookkeepers. The shrine will carry on either way. It is a hinge. Only the hand that chooses knows what it has purchased. It is possible, standing there, to think of those who walked beside the undead, and then away, of a knight who chased a sun and nearly mistook a parasite for a promise, of a scholar who sought safety in the certainty of crystal and found a silence that answered but did not comfort, of a father at thresholds and a daughter who measured love by the cost of rescue, of a woman who kept a fire for strangers, and of the day her voice returned to her, of a city drowned to preserve its soul, of bones that agreed to move together, and a tree that hated its own heart. These, and other reckonings, gather around the flame, like attendants who will not speak, unless spoken to. They say nothing. They wait to be understood. Some remember that the music in the kiln sounds like hands that once knew a harp, and now rest in the lap of a man who has finished his work. It does not urge. It does not warn. It simply keeps time, so that a decision may match it. The undead listens. The heat wavers. The ash lifts and falls with no wind to move it. The world holds its breath for as long as it takes to breathe, and then the hand moves into the fire or away from it. The result will be sung in different words by those who come later, and they will be certain, as the certain always are, that the choice was inevitable. But this moment belongs to no prophecy and no serpent. It belongs to the pilgrim who learned to set ladders for himself, who learned the weight of honest steel and the mercy of shared flame, who looked into water and sometimes saw accusation and sometimes saw a report. He acts according to what has endured in him after everything that could be taken was taken. Beyond the blaze or beyond the ash, the roads will begin again, because roads always do. Ages do not end so much as fold. They close like well-used books and are opened by other hands. The undead, who has now earned another name or none at all, takes a step that feels very much like the first step he ever took. It is a simple motion. It is the work, and the place where endings are decided accepts it without spectacle, the way the sea accepts a stone and makes a quiet ring around the point where it entered. So the age turns toward light that is briefly bright, or toward a dark that belongs to those who will bear it. The fire will one day ask again. The dark will one day answer again. Between them stands the shape of a person who learned to go on. He breathes in air that tastes of ash and memory. He breathes out. The road is ahead, as it has always been. It is said that when a choice is made at the edge of the world, the sound it makes is smaller than a breath. The dunes of ash hold their lines. The shrine keeps its ember. The bells do not declare a verdict. What changes first is the weight carried in a single chest. A hand has decided between two honest roads, and the world, which has always been a ledger written in wind and fire, adjusts its entries without ceremony. The age bends. If light returns, it does so the way a familiar hymn returns, not to end grief, but to teach endurance in its rhythm. The fields ripen, walls keep out the ordinary night. Mothers remember lullabies that had almost gone thin, and black armor gleams only in memory. The undead who knelt is not named. He is only warmth distributed to 1,000 low flames that will feed other names that will not know his gift. This is a mercy that does not insist on witnesses. If the dark is welcomed, it arrives the way truth often arrives, plain, patient, and uninterested in applause. Faces look upward and learn to own their shadows. Old prayers loosen, new vows take their place, spoken in voices that do not ask the sky for permission. Cities find the measure of themselves when banners no longer tell them what color to be. The undead who turned away is not crowned. He is only the first to say aloud what had been waiting in men's mouths. This is a freedom that does not require a shout. Either way, the shrine remains. Wind crosses the arches and names the same 3 paths until the names feel like stone. The firekeeper's hands remember the curve of a bowl. A warrior sits with his back to the wall and listens to steps he once counted. Traders come and go. The anvil finds its rhythm again and then falls silent and then begins again. Those who return to this circle learn what the undead learned before them, that beginnings are shaped like thresholds, and thresholds are shaped like circles. What was carried here has changed. The ladders lowered for a future self are folded into a memory of kindness. The elevators, once promises, have become facts. Messages written on stone by unseen hands. Keep teaching simple grammar, beware fall. Try rolling, praise the sun. A stranger bows in white and is gone, and in that small courtesy, a world declares that it is still capable of courtesy. Names thin and gather. Some depart to places where they will never be found again. Some are rescued and remain. Some are rescued and still do not remain. The shrine does not judge the arithmetic. It offers a seat, a heat, and a question. Will you go on? The answer is always the same, though it is spoken by different mouths. Yes, we will go on. To say that the journey is complete would be to misunderstand its purpose. The road that led from a cell to a kiln does not end in victory or defeat. It ends in a person who has learned to endure, to share fire, to tell the truth, even when it does not grant safety. That is the work, that is the relic, saved from ash. Not a crown, not a charter, not a prophecy kept, but a posture, standing when standing is difficult, rising when rising seems without point, offering warmth when the wind would rather keep everything cold. Some remember that the quiet after great labor is not empty. It is the room where strength returns to its simplest form. Steel is cleaned. Scars are read like a map for the next traveler. The flask is lifted and set down. A head bows without instruction. The fire's breath answers with a patient yes. In time, another will wake in another narrow room and discover that doors have hinges. Another will hear the wings of a raven and feel the world tilt into flight. Another will sit at the shrine and learn the craft of choosing, and the flame, larger or smaller, higher or lower, will still be here to teach without words. The serpents will speak again. The bells will be rung again. Ages will lean and be set upright and lean again. The stillness after flame is not the end of sound. It is the silence that allows a step to be heard. It is the breath that makes saying yes possible. The undead, whichever name he wears now or none, looks at the road as if it were the first time and the last. He understands that going on is not defiance alone. It is devotion. It is the plainest courage. And so he walks, and the world, which has grown to know him, makes a quiet ring around the point where his foot meets the earth.